What is a casual game? What is a competitive game? Because it's hard to find a modern gaming related conversation that isn't framed through the lens of one of these two perspectives. Every decision, every balance change, every patch weighed by the community. Oh, are they catering to hardcore players or are they catering to casuals? And for developers, this is quite the conundrum. Who do you design your game for? Who do you cater to? Well, as a Halo fan, this is a topic that I see brought up a lot, and even though I have a lot of examples that involve Halo, I see this everywhere. I think this is applicable across gaming as a whole, and I think just about everybody is going about it the wrong way, both us, the players, and the developers. It is influencing way too much of our design and way too much of our feedback, because 99% of the discourse surrounding the dichotomy between casual and competitive design, it's wrong. And my goal for this video is to try and get you to stop seeing games through this lens of it being one or the other. Because great games can do both, and great design can achieve both simultaneously. It is a mistake to think casual and competitive design are mutually exclusive or that they conflict with each other. And I'd like to start with an illustration to show why our current mindset is not working. Here's what our devs are thinking about.
There's another push that we had with Halo 4, which was to make Halo a more accessible multiplayer experience. Historically, Halo's been very hardcore, and it's had a very steep learning curve that has turned off a lot of players. So we wanted to help new players find success. We wanted to give them opportunities in modes like Infinity Slayer to earn power weapons that they might never have got a chance to use in multiplayer before.
We also want an experience that's competitive and fair. We are a very competitive game. That's our DNA. That's who we are, right? You go back all the way to the very first Halo, right? Multiplayer. I mean, it is a highly competitive game. And so we want an experience where players can expect that the game is competitive and fair. And skill and teamwork should be a path to victory.
Hopefully that didn't give you whiplash, and I think this is an interesting point to kick us off. The first video is about Halo 4, where they mentioned, hey, a lot of people thought classic Halo was too hardcore, so our goal was to make the game more accessible. But now in more recent years and months, they talk about Halo like, oh man, we are a competitive game, that's who we are, that's our DNA. And you know what we did? We shit all over this guy. We went, oh man, these people have no idea what they're doing. 343 is clueless, they don't understand Halo, and this tweet actually got referenced quite a bit. This is a tweet by Hardy LaBelle basically saying, hey, originally, Halo was designed to be a party game. And a lot of folks were like, oh, checkmate. Halo was designed to be a party game, came straight from the OGs. We shouldn't cater to competitive players. Well, wait a second. Why did everyone hate Halo 4? They made a conscious effort to make Halo more approachable because it was too hardcore, and we hated it. We thought they dumbed the game down. They made it too casual. They compromised their design and changed the formula too much. It performed very poorly, at least compared to previous Halos, and I mean, we hated it so much that 343 had to do a complete 180. And then for Halo 5, it was overbearingly competitive. It was all they talked about. They had a pro team helping with development, and they were really focused on esports. And now in this day and age, for Halo Infinite, they say, hey, we're a competitive game, that's who we are. And sentiment has shifted 180 degrees back. Now we clown on them for saying that. We say, no, Halo's a casual game, a party game. That's what it always was. That's how it should be designed. That's what the original series was all about. Strange. Because if that's what Halo was, if that's how Halo was designed, then why did Josh Holmes go out on stage and say that they wanted to make Halo 4 more casual because historically Halo has been very hardcore? If those same games that we now look back on with adoration were just party games, why is Josh saying those same games were too hardcore and that's why we had to make Halo more casual? I mean, it's a fucking paradox. Or maybe we've just been misidentifying a bunch of shit. Maybe we have been thrown for such a loop from years of poor direction and decisions that we've developed design vertigo, and our perception of casual and competitive design has been skewed. I mean, it is confusing, isn't it? And I think at this point, developers are confused, and we are confused, because we are making decisions on behalf of competitive play that make no sense, and making decisions for casual play that also make no sense. Throughout the course of history, every time a game, doesn't have to be Halo, every time a game thinks it needs to be more casual, and it alters its design to do so, it is hit with extreme backlash, criticism that systems are being dumbed down, depth is being removed, and the identity of a game is being changed in order to appeal to the lowest common denominator. And then when the course correction comes and they go, no way man, we are hardcore, then it's like, well, the fun's being sucked out. Everything is sterile. They're removing all of the variables for the sake of consistency. And no matter which way they go, they get shit on. And it's because we don't actually want one or the other, even if we say we do, even if we think we do. At the end of the day, designing around casual and competitive play is a non-starter because we simply cannot put something as complex and nuanced as game design into two simple and, quite frankly, vague categories of consideration. Both experiences, something being fun to pick up and hard to master, that's something everyone wants. That's something everyone craves. The testament of what makes a game great is in how well it pairs both of those things together in harmony. The idea that these concepts are combative is ruining our discourse, and it is ruining our design. Because great design can be both, and we are severely limiting ourselves with the assumption that it can't. And the idea that it is conflicting has made modern game design downright paradoxical. I'll give you an illustration of how, and it's no particular game I'm referring to, but I think if you think long and hard, you'll probably be able to come up with a couple franchises that fit this description. At a game's inception, most studios have what is often referred to as pillars. These are essentially the backbone of your experience, your design goals, your main points of emphasis that form the direction of your game. There can be 7 of these, 10, sometimes as little as 3, but almost without fail in our modern gaming industry, you'll hear this. Our game is for everybody. Call of Duty is for everybody. Halo is for everybody. Now, to me, that shouldn't be a pillar because it's already a no shit. But for a lot of teams, that is a design goal, and it will influence their design in regards to, hey, we need to make sure our game is accessible. We need to make sure everyone can succeed or contribute or just flat out win sometimes. Things need to be easy enough for people of all skill levels to be able to play our game, because if things are too tough or too complicated or too hardcore, they will feel alienated and they'll leave. Simultaneously, they will have another pillar. Play it your way. They want to empower the player. They want them to have freedom, agency, options, and multiple play styles to choose from. Players have to have as much control over this experience as possible, and this manifests itself almost every time without fail as mobility and movement mechanics. Because your base mechanics, literally the fucking buttons on your controller, that is the quickest way to deliver an experience to the player. Our game is fast and responsive. You can do whatever you want at any point. You can run, slide, climb, you can cancel everything and start a new action halfway through. Game feel and doing whatever you want is a pillar, and it's not necessarily a bad one. Do I think 95% of the market needs to share the same set of underlying mechanics? No. But high mobility and giving players a ton of agency over their avatar is not an inherent issue. Giving players a lot of choice or control is not an issue. But when you give players control, and you give the surface level inputs of your game a ton of variation, then naturally the skill gap of your game starts to develop there. And people who are really good get better and better at taking these movement mechanics and base abilities that exist as a pillar in your game to levels that some people will never achieve. And whether or not that skill gap was an intended element of your pillar, or they're exceeding what you thought was possible because you were just trying to make it feel good, you then run into a situation where good players are all of a sudden whooping up on less skilled players. And oh shit, that contradicts our other pillar. So you gotta have the movement. You like the way it feels. Everyone in the focus group loves the way it feels. In the last game you changed it and everyone got mad because it didn't feel as good anymore. So the movement's gotta be nutty. But then you gotta solve this new problem. How can we have this movement and all of this insane potential and yet still make it so everybody can hop in, play our game, and succeed? They can play and win. Well, you make the guns piss as shit easy to use. Everybody is moving around at light speed and manipulating the fuck out of their hitbox, so we need to make sure all of our guns have super generous aim assist. We need to make sure at least a portion of our sandbox consists of brain dead guns that the casuals can use and do good with. And you've now compromised your sandbox. You've compromised the design integrity of your weapons because you have to make sure everybody can keep up with the movement that you also designed. New problem though. Now all of the people who enjoy your movement, the competitive players, well, they're pissed. They've mastered all of this tech. They can contort their hitbox in ways that Picasso would be envious of. They can run and gun through a map at light speed, but oh man, somebody who's not even good at the game decided to sit in a corner and blast you with a bullshit rifle as you flew by, and now your kill streak's over. And you're pissed. This is Camp City, and these maps suck. I'm getting shot from everywhere. There's too much verticality. I die before I can even look up. There's way too many places to get shot from, and there's no opportunity for me to feasibly check all of these different angles. Open spaces become no man's land because you get melted immediately when you walk out there, but also intricate spaces become a death trap because there's too many places for people to hide. And so now we have to completely sterilize our map design. We have to minimize the points of contact. We have to dampen the verticality. We have to be very specific about what cover is available because we don't want people sitting behind it and head glitching. And that's why the industry is dominated by boring map design. That's why certain franchises are dominated by 3-lane designs, where you funnel the point of engagement along 3 pathways, limiting the opportunities for the paths to interact with each other, thus decreasing the chances you get flanked, thus enabling the run and gun playstyle that all your feedback tells you is the most fun way to play the game. But the reality is, we have completely pigeonholed our design. We've reached a point where we are running down what essentially amounts to one of 3 hallways with minimal cover, very few, if any, dynamic elements, with guns that are easy as shit to use, and with movement that is super fluid and snappy, and oh man, it feels good, but we are doing it on maps that have been completely neutered of opportunity, and with guns that are as shallow as a dried up puddle. It's completely paradoxical. We design our guns to stop our movement, and design our maps to stop our guns, and design our movement to give players a ton of cool opportunities, but have had to remove half the opportunities from our maps in order to do it. It is design cannibalism, and it represents a large portion of the multiplayer experiences that we play today. Do you see that conflict? How issues within our base mechanics trickle out, and then if the wrong mindset is applied, surrounding systems get corrupted. Our systems are being designed to cancel each other out instead of being in harmony and complementing one another. And a lot of that can change when we stop seeing casual and competitive as a conflict. But it's about time we start looking at some specific examples. I want to show you some designs and concepts that right now are considered one or the other. I am showing you a perspective on how no, actually, they can appeal to both if we change the way we perceive them. Let's consider game physics. Competitive or casual? Well, 343 Industries, the creators of Halo Infinite, they think it's casual. For instance, most people noticed when Halo Infinite came out that the physics seemed to have been neutered a bit. Classic maneuvers like nade jumping didn't feel as good, and fan favorite weapons like the gravity hammer, a weapon well renowned for its ability to manipulate physics objects, suddenly it seemed far less capable of doing so, at least at launch. And this was 343's reasoning for that. Regarding the desire for increased physics impulses, that's something that's a sensitive area between capturing the fun and legacy physics players expect in a Halo game and balancing around a competitive shooter in a way that feels exciting but maintains consistency. Oh yeah, you know, we gotta dial these physics back. If we have too much physics, our game's not gonna be competitive. I mean, what is this, fucking Quake? Jesus, using the physics from explosions to strategically move throughout the map? Get those filthy ass casual concepts out of here. We have clamber and grappling hooks now. I mean, it's just so counterintuitive. Physics and a player's ability to utilize them are not only competitively viable, they are literally a limitless opportunity for skill expression. They, if done well, can increase the skill gap, increase the integrity of competitive play, increase the ceiling for an individual to express skill within the game. They enable players to utilize their tools and the environment in new and creative ways, whether it be propelling yourself with explosions, flinging crates across the map with a gravity hammer, or using a brute shot to launch your own mongoose at somebody. Compelling physics are an ocean of creativity and potential, and we are shutting them off at the faucet. And sure, you add a 1 in a million chance of getting killed by a random flying traffic cone that got hurled at you via an explosion. And sure, maybe sometimes you get hit with a nade and it pushes you off the edge of a map. Not only do I think these things are insignificant and not worth worrying about, they're kind of even cool. Those side effects are absolutely minuscule compared to the new things that can be done with intentionality, to intentionally utilize physics to manipulate elements within the environment, or to enact strategies, or to use a weapon in a creative way. Those are literally some of the most rewarding things you can do in a game. Something as simple as grenade jumping, which was severely nerfed in Halo Infinite. In classic Halo, that was a skill test interesting strategy you could use to creatively navigate throughout a map, albeit at the tactical trade-off of one of your grenades and a portion of your health. By carefully placing a nade and timing your jump, you could do some incredible things and make some incredible plays. If we added more physics to Halo, if we added more opportunities to manipulate them, skill expression would increase. I mean, there are competitive games dedicated to literally just the creative manipulation of physics-based elements. Rocket League is just soccer with cars, and yet the momentum in physics gameplay is so captivating and satisfying and expressive that it's selling out arenas for its esports tournaments. Whether you're subtly adjusting the position of your car to cause the ball to redirect and keep its momentum, or you cut at just the right time to not only stop the ball, but keep it grounded so you can take possession, every shot is a calculation of physics that has led to a game that, despite it being close to 10 years old, it has continued in prosperity. Because not only are compelling physics a wonderful and engaging avenue of skill expression, but it is powerful enough to support a game for decades almost single-handedly. And I'm not saying Halo has to be just as nutty as Rocket League in this regard. They are completely different games. But the concept of physics, that's not a casual element. If designed correctly, they can and should make your games more competitive, while yes, absolutely making the games more fun at a casual level. Think of all of the crazy custom games that use the gravity hammer and its physics manipulation properties. Think of all of the crazy shenanigans it causes in BTB. But we as fans shouldn't argue on behalf of physics as a casual feature, and we should not blame competitive play for its removal, even if that's the reason 343 gave, because 343 is wrong for doing this, and 343 is counterintuitive in how it's designing for Halo. There is this idea that competitive games need to be 100% consistent, and that physics can add unpredictable variables. No, a good physics system is predictable. That's why we can use it intentionally. That's why we can use it to perform specific maneuvers. That's why we can strategically place grenades to launch weapons as a strategy on certain maps. And this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but I think it will elevate my point. This is the conflict visualized. Here is launching a weapon in Halo 2.
Well, to accomplish that, all we have to do is go to BR2, aim at the middle barrel towards the top side, and the sniper rifle will come flying at us across the map.
Here is launching a weapon in Infinite. It doesn't work. But if you try the same thing with a plasma grenade, now they can fly, right? It's not that physics do not exist in Infinite, they do. They're just turned on and off at random. 343 is overthinking it. They're sitting there hyper-fixating and over-analyzing every single little interaction. Well, we turned physics way down by default on the frags, but people really like weapon launching, so let's turn it back on, but only for plasma grenades and only for weapons on pads. Okay, so now we got weapon launching in the game, check. Instead of it being this dynamic, creative use of existing systems, it's more of this purpose-built, highly specific interaction that they curated because they identified it as this specific thing that couldn't be done anymore, that people would bitch about, so they just created a contrivance to get it in there. At least that's how it feels. Could they have just randomly left physics on for plasma grenades as an oversight? Maybe. But whether it be unintentional or on purpose, it's inconsistent. The whole game is inconsistent in this regard because they're viewing it as a conflict. They're viewing it as something that needs to constantly be offset, and they're nerfing some mechanics and then letting others live at will, like they're fucking Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator. And look, they're trying. They're just almost trying too hard. Instead of looking at every single physics opportunity in a vacuum and then removing, nerfing, buffing, well, we removed it at launch, but people complained, so we added it back in, or, we turn impulses off for this, turn them back on for that. If you have to specifically A-OK every single interaction, you're not going to let us make new ones. You're not going to be able to harness their full creative potential, and then you're going to make the world feel artificial, disconnected, sterile. Physics should be systemic. They should be intuitive. This is not. This is confused and conflicted. Whether something works or doesn't work, it's now arbitrary, and it's just not very good. If you design a compelling, intuitive, consistent, and interactive physics system, you will vastly improve the game for both casuals and competitive players. That doesn't mean we throw balance out the window. That doesn't mean we let everything slide no matter how stupid it is. And that also doesn't mean every single game needs physics. The main point is that physics or no physics, it has nothing to do with making a game more casual or competitive. It is entirely up to how you execute the design, and with strong design, a compelling physics system can benefit both sides. Let's switch to another topic. If I were to ask you, why is modern day map design so boring? Why does it feel like maps are not as good as they once were? Well, a common answer I hear is, devs care way too much about esports. They are too worried about catering to the competitive player. And so that's why the majority of maps have adopted a 3-lane or killbox style design. That's why maps can't be too complex or be too dynamic or be too vertical or have too many points of engagement or be too busy or have too much cover or too much open space or, have too many fucking decisions to make. It's because we have to cater to the competitive esports scene. Folks, I feel like I'm going crazy. I can't be the only one who realizes how completely ass backwards that is. Please tell me you see how completely paradoxical that is from a design perspective. You don't think it's strange that 3-lane maps, some of the simplest maps in the world, the safest maps when it comes to not intimidating new players so they know where to go, are the ones being pushed as the competitive maps, the maps for the highest level player? In a world that makes way more fucking sense than this one, 3-lane maps are the casual maps. They're simpler, they're easier to learn, they're harder to get lost in. If you're new to the game, they're less overwhelming, they will literally funnel you towards engagements, and they decrease the amount of factors you need to consider at any given time. It's baby's first map design. It is logically the most casual design in the world in the sense that it is the most approachable and least complex, and yet they are dominating our industry, at least our traditional multiplayer experiences. Obviously, BRs and extraction shooters won't have this problem. And look, there's nothing wrong with 3-lane maps inherently. They're nothing special, but 1 or 2 here, it's no problem. Some of the best levels in history have used this format, but we have become over-reliant on them. They are dominating traditional multiplayer games, and I think it's because we've lost sight of what great map design can do. We've become so conditioned by modern game design that skill expression is almost universally derived from base mechanics and movement that we will literally advocate for map design to become stupid baby shit just so we can wiggle around with our bullshit rifles and not have to look in more than 2 directions at any one time. And that's the feedback we give these devs. I mean, look at Call of Duty. This style of map dominated that franchise for like a decade. Every time a map broke from that mold or a game tried to do something different, the maps were shit on. Now, admittedly, some of these maps were the layout equivalent of Swiss cheese, but the fact that 3-lane maps seemingly were the only maps that ever worked is probably a sign that there are underlying issues with your mechanics, whether they feel good at a surface level or not. And this year, COD just fucking threw in the towel. We don't even fucking know how to make maps anymore. Let's just bring back a bunch of old ones. I see the same thing in Halo. Look at the launch roster of Halo Infinite's maps. Outside of a couple outliers that tried something different, most of them were again just sterile industry bog standard 3-lane maps or kill boxes. I do see a bit more variety coming through in the DLC and some of the Forge maps, but Halo has a long way to go before it gets back to where it used to be and where it should be, which is, dropping banger after banger. If complex, intricate map design with fast, compelling gameplay opportunities are casual, if dynamic on-map mechanics are casual, if having more things to learn and consider and master within the map itself is casual, then something is wrong. Because in a world that actually makes sense, having map-specific elements and nuanced complex layouts and multiple things to learn on a per-map basis, that should add depth to your game. That should be an element of a game's competitive scene. That should be a part of the skill gap. But it isn't. And the reason we don't feel that way is because we've been conditioned into our beliefs, and because our gameplay is severely flawed outside of a very narrow slice of design space. If our gameplay is designed well, it should allow for more complexity in our level design. And again, if designed well, features such as dynamic map elements can both be fun and add to the potential skill expression of the game. One of my favorites, Gears of War, was fantastic at incorporating dynamic elements into its layouts, and sometimes these events would alter the layouts themselves. One simple one was Thrashball in Gears 3, where the overhead scoreboard could be shot down to not only remove a power weapon spawn from the middle of the map and and kill unsuspecting players underneath, but it also added a permanent piece of cover that drastically altered sightlines whenever this event was triggered. Another map, Avalanche from Gears 2, would feature an avalanche as a scripted event that occurred during the match. You would be warned by a loud siren, and it would not only kill you if you were in the way, but it would fill up certain areas of the map, blocking some routes, but adding new ones that would gain you access to new weapons that became available. Bullet Marsh featured the Krill, monsters that would swoop in and eat you, but as long as you stay in the light, you're safe. So this map featured a generator that keeps the lights on, and if you shoot it, the lamps that just so happen to be hovering over some power weapons would go out, and the Krill could swoop in and destroy you. Then yeah, some maps were just simple. Their layouts were enough, but because they had such a strong collection and combination of maps, some with no dynamic elements, some with a few minor ones, some with huge map-altering ones, it stayed fresh. And these dynamic elements not only represented a bunch of fun, exciting, and interesting mechanics for casual players to enjoy, but they're opportunities and strategies that competitive players can utilize as well. And I also think when we put our maps into boxes, competitive or casual, and we design for the polarities, yeah, obviously we sterilize our competitive maps, that's a problem, but I also think it does a disservice to our other maps as well. Is Halo's High Ground going to see much tournament play? No. It's a one-sided, asymmetrical, objectives-based map. It has vehicles, it's more about delivering a fantasy of storming a beach or defending your base. But you can take a game on High Ground seriously. You can coordinate with a team, come up with an attack strategy or a defense strategy. Hey, let's get somebody inside to open up the gate so we can get a vehicle in and out. Or let's snag the grab lift so that we can hop over the wall to grab the laser and the height advantage. This is not a quote-unquote competitive map, but it should be balanced. It should still be considerate and intelligently made. And the more we think about casual and competitive design as separate, the less care and consideration the so-called casual designs get. Our maps should be about variety. They should offer a wide range of experiences, some complex, some simple, some dynamic, some static, because map design should be viewed as a collection of experiences, not a set of binary ones. And we need to wake up to that, because map design and environmental mechanics are like a limitless fountain of depth and opportunity that we are currently just not utilizing at all. Maps are designed to stay out of the way when they could literally be the catalyst for brand new experiences just by themselves. How do we keep messing this up? What do you mean maps are designed for competitive player casuals? There's like fucking 12 of them. Let's get creative. We can support everyone as long as the designs are strong. Again, it's about execution, or at least it should be. And one thing that will greatly open up the potential of our maps is if our games have compelling weapons. I see a lot of complaints about weapons these days. They're cheap, they take no skill, there's too much aim assist, the weapons I like to use are fun, but they can't compete with these other bullshit ones, and I think it's fair to say that modern weapon design is pretty well infected with the whole, oh, we need to make sure everybody can use these mindset. Again, if you try to balance your sandbox around competitive or casual play, you'll hurt the game. Really, we just need to focus on integrity. Does my input have a proportional output? Does my proficiency with said weapon proportionally influence the result of an encounter? Am I properly rewarded for my skill, and am I properly punished for my lack thereof? That sounds competitive. That sounds like we're gonna make the game too sweaty. No, it's just common sense. Look. Let's take Halo's battle rifle because I've covered it in great detail in the past. In Infinite, the battle rifle is basically hit scan. You point it and shoot it, super simple. It's also very powerful and has a consistent recoil pattern that when you're firing, if you aim at someone's chest, the recoil will carry your shot upward and hit your opponent in the head, making it almost more advantageous to shoot at the body instead of the head. Here's the problem. You make the gun easy to use, and it does two things. First, yeah, you're occasionally going to get some easy kills because it's just pretty hard to get out of the way. Halo Infinite does have a nasty strafe and a lot of movement, but at mid-range, the BR's sweet spot, it kind of just swallows all that and melts you anyway. This doesn't feel great for the competitive player. They're like, what the fuck? I'm way better. I was strafing and doing all this shit, and I'm still getting cross-mapped by people who are just running in a straight line. When we make guns too easy to use, we make them feel inevitable. It makes players feel like there is nothing they can do. They have no counterplay. This is why egregious aim assist in Call of Duty feels so bad. You pull some crazy maneuver and the game just aims for them and they get the kill anyway. It feels like shit. It feels like all the movement and tech you've been practicing sometimes is just nullified because of that concept we talked about at the very beginning. Hey, people are moving at light speed. We got to make sure all players can actually hit these targets, and we compromise the integrity of the guns to do so. Now the problem, and it's pretty obvious, the people who are good at the game also get to use these guns. They can also take advantage of their ease of use and fly through the map, melting low-level players. Ironically, making guns super easy to use are only going to hurt the casual players more. They're going to be annihilated because everyone has laser beams and can melt you from across the map. Isn't that ironic? The guns that are designed for casual players makes the game worse for casual players. Geez, it's almost like the entire concept is stupid. Think about it. Let's just say we take the battle rifle, and instead of hit scan where bullets just instantly travel at light speed across the map, let's make it projectile, where you have to meaningfully lead your shots. You have to calculate distance and adjust your shot leading accordingly. And it makes a strafe more effective. When you have a sudden change in direction, a projectile weapon has to compensate more for that. It increases the skill gap, targets are harder to hit, and become progressively even harder to hit the farther they are away. And you know what that means for the casual player? They're safer. They walk out into the open space and someone starts shooting at them. They might actually miss. The casual player has more room for error, more opportunities to travel the map and thus learn it and thus utilize more of it, more opportunity to strategize because the weapons in the game are such that they don't just melt everyone. They can, and they'll feel even better and more rewarding when they do, but they are not inevitable. And that increased variance, that increased average time to kill, does wonders to alleviate that sense of inescapable pressure and the helplessness that so many players feel. And you do it by, ironically, making the guns harder to use. And then even if the optimal time to kill remains the same, when the average time of kill is higher and you actually have the opportunity to make a counterplay, you open the door for strategies that less dexterous players can take advantage of. It opens the door for more mental skill, and it opens the door for expanded map design. We can use open spaces. We can allow you to be shot from more than 2 places at once. We can introduce more complexity in our layouts because there's less pressure overall. And when there's less pressure on you, there's less pressure on the map design to keep you protected. And we did it by adding more skill to the guns, to add more skill to our map design, to simultaneously make casuals more comfortable while making more interesting maps that casuals like. That's not a conflict, that's harmony. You see how that works? Guns need to be casual, guns need to be competitive. Nope, just give them integrity, it'll sort itself out. And even if some people don't like it, at least you'll be able to hang your hat on it. At least you can say, it's fair, it's reasonable, it's logical, as opposed to people going, why is the aim assist so high? Why is this so easy to use? And then you, as a dev, knowing you fucked the game up on purpose no less, have to go out there facing the mob with a stick up your ass. Well, it's important that everybody has fun and that everybody can feel like they're contributing in a meaningful way. Shut the fuck up. We're not having fun. And that casual demographic that you're so desperate to capture, I'd argue a meaningful game with worthwhile mechanics that they can learn and get better at and invest in is way more likely to keep them playing long term than handing them a bullshit rifle and hoping they don't get bored. Real quick on movement, again, you can have whatever movement you want. You can make it fast, you can make it slow. I love Halo 3, but I also love Titanfall. In one game you can barely move, in the other I barely touch the ground. You can do either as long as you design your game holistically to account for it. Movement can be a great source of skill expression, and there's a lot of games that let you do it. And if you're designing your game with advanced movement, you need to embrace that. You need to design guns not to counteract it, but to reward it. And no, I don't mean by allowing people to spawn with brain-dead shotguns and just let everyone slide around one-shotting people. That's not rewarding. That's degenerate and fucking dumb. I mean, don't nullify skillful movement tech by making all your weapons have pseudo lock-on in order to purposefully offset the movement you put in the game, okay? And you need to design maps not to restrain your movement, but to provide it with opportunities. If I have a bunch of cool shit that I can do, make maps that reward me for doing that cool shit. Don't put me in a box with 3 hallways and then slap an invisible wall in my face every time I try and get creative. If you put movement in your game, embrace it. But we also need to acknowledge that you can have skills outside of movement, and sometimes you can add skills by removing movement. Limitations can generate gameplay as well, and what's compelling about using limitations in your design is that they can simultaneously increase skill while reducing upfront variables, thus making the game more approachable. Learning how to work around limitations or deficiencies can be fun and rewarding and skill testing. For instance, if you have a jetpack, I'm sure you can do a lot of nutty stuff with that, but you're also going to trivialize a lot of navigation and traversal in the game. It's another button on your controller, it's another tool that you can use in a moment-to-moment encounter, but is it strictly an increase in skill? I'd argue it isn't. If you need to reach some high up ledge, that problem is trivialized by a jetpack, right? You just fly up there. But if you need to reach that same ledge without a jetpack, well, now it's like, okay, map knowledge. What's the quickest way to get there? Is there something nearby that I can use to help me? Perhaps an explosive barrel that I can blow up and use to propel myself up there at the cost of my health. You know, physics. Or maybe there's an interactive map element that you can utilize. You use the sandbox, you use your environment, you use your fucking head, and you overcome a limitation. That's skill too. That's skill enabled by not having something. And so yes, make whatever kind of game you want, but the idea that more options, more agency, more upfront power is strictly the way you enable competitive play, that's wrong. You take the example we gave earlier about having projectile weapons. Well, having a nutty, slippery strafe with projectiles would probably feel bad and not really be possible to calculate, right? So if we added projectile weapons, which increases the skill gap of shooting, we may, to support that skill gap, intentionally slow down your strafe, right? Because calculating projectiles, while it's still dexterous, it's got a lot of mental skill. And to complement that, we want to make the strafe more pronounced, more readable. We want the animations to be such that an opposing player can look at a target, read the movement, analyze and notice the state of the animation, properly account for it, and fire a shot based on that. If you have frictionless, near instant strafing, it diminishes the shot leading and makes it more of a frustrating crapshoot. You slow the strafe down a bit, you make it readable, you make it predictable. Now all of a sudden you've enhanced that skill. It's learnable and reasonable, and you've simultaneously diminished some of that obnoxious movement in the game where people are just worming throughout the map, which probably helps new players. Whoa, so you're saying we limited a strafe to increase the skill gap of the game via gun skill, while simultaneously creating more consistent target profiles for all players, including casuals? And this will also simultaneously allow for a more expanded variety of map design because our weapons and movement are not in conflict with each other? Wow, it's almost like we're just making good games now instead of worrying about catering to people. It's almost like good complementary design has a way of appealing to everyone because we as human beings just have a natural proclivity to compelling mechanics. And now that we're nearing the end of this discussion, hopefully it's a little clearer that this casual versus competitive design conundrum is only a problem because we've made it a problem. Developers are too focused on compromising and finding some mythical equilibrium between the two, and it's making our games worse, and it's making us worse at evaluating them. Too often, skill is measured as a singular property, and developers bend over backwards to balance that in some hopeful middle ground. If something becomes too skillful, oh well, now we got to counteract it. If something becomes too simple and meaningless, okay, let's swing the pendulum in the other direction. The problem is that skill is measured with 2 points. There is a skill floor and a skill ceiling. There is a point that indicates your game's approachability, and that point at which players can find and understand the primary gameplay loop, the bare minimum required to play the game at a casual level, if you will. And there is another point on the opposite side of the spectrum that represents the ceiling of your game, the depth, the opportunity for mastery, its competitive potential. And your goal should not be to find a middle ground between these two, no. Instead, we should constantly be pushing these 2 points as far away from each other as possible to their polarities. A large gap indicates a game that is easy to learn and hard to master, which is design nirvana. Not every idea can do this, some visions are naturally a little more complex or a little simpler, but we just want to push them as far away from each other as the design allows, because that polarity is what makes them compelling. That journey that you can take where when you start out, you know, it's approachable and interesting, but then you dig deeper and deeper and oh my God, there's just so much to learn and so much to discover. And you may never reach the end of the spectrum, and that's okay. Because if your game has integrity and it's not filled with a bunch of bullshit compromises, it will be fun at all of these levels. When you believe that you have to compromise between casual and competitive design and you attempt to cancel them out or equal them out, what you are actually doing is you're just pushing these points closer to each other. Because even if you have high-skilled maneuvers in your game, you may have too many systems that undermine that skill, right? Your movement might be mechanically deep, but if I can circumvent that movement by exploiting something easy, then the gap shrinks. And as we've discussed, it's not necessary. At this point, my hope is that you are already starting to think outside of the confines of casual and competitive design, that these two elements can coexist, and great design can actually contribute to both simultaneously. This is important to me because I plan to discuss game design a lot on this channel going forward, and not only do I hope that I've changed your perspective, but I want mine to be known very clearly. When discussing games, I do not think like this. I do not look at individual elements of design as throwing a bone to casuals or appeasing competitive players. I do not think it matters. I think games are worse when we worry about it. That's the honest truth. We need to just worry about making great games, not who we're making them for. Great design will appeal to the people it needs to. I'm not interested in whether a design satisfies the market at the time. I want games that are timeless. And I don't care about games that you do or don't have time for. I just care that they're worth your time. And we don't have time to worry about whether a game is too casual or a game is too competitive, because the more we perpetuate this as a problem, the more we keep going in the wrong direction. I believe the best games in the world are the games made with indifference to preference, the games that are confident enough to be whatever they were dreamt up to be, the games that have a vision and follow through on that vision without compromise. We need to build our games with logic, with passion, and with integrity. Every mechanic, every concept, every system built to support one another. And if we do that, we will make great games. And if your game is made with integrity, you won't have to manipulate people into loving it. They just will. Till next time.